In the next couple of months, we'll be crossing the billion orders processed for over 60,000 restaurants in 52 markets.
Can I order a pasta now on Instagram right away, or see a video on TikTok and order a steak for myself?
Hey, how do I get my customers on my platform or my app? And it's convincing someone to use digital, not pen and paper, was quite hard.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back on the Bolanga Talks podcast. And it's me, Stefan Soroka, bringing you exciting guests again from the food and grocery delivery industry. And today, I'm excited to introduce you to Zhong Su, the co-founder and the CEO of Deliverect. Zhong, welcome to the podcast. Very excited to meet you and to speak to you today.
Thank you, Stefan. Really excited to be finally at your podcast. Big fan of what you do. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. To start with, could you please introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us about what you guys do at Deliverect.
Yeah, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Deliverect. I founded Deliverect with other co-founders around 6 years ago. And what we do is we are the global digital ordering management platform for restaurant, right? So we help them around the world to work one side with marketplaces to place orders on Uber Eats, Deliveroo, DoorDash, and so on, as well, their own website from first party to even in-store to kiosk, right? Especially, I think these days where, if you're a restaurant, you need to be fully digital. It's really important. After 6 years, I think we process now, almost a billion orders. We're at, 850 million. So I think in the next couple of months, we'll be crossing the billion orders processed for over 60,000 restaurants in 52 markets. So really, really happy that we are making impact. I think it's our goal to help restaurants succeed. And, we're doing our bit to make that happen. For the rest, although Deliverect is quite young, it's not an overnight success. People always ask, hey, how did you do that scaling so quickly? Because we are even with 500 people. Beside Deliverect, before I literally grew up in the restaurant tech industry. My first company I was at age 16 creating ugly website for Chinese restaurants in the 90s. And then, after I studied some software engineering, when Steve Jobs launched the first iPhone and iPad 1 in 2009, 2010, I created the first iPad point of sale. So that's today even a public company called Lightspeed around the world. But so always very passionate about food and restaurant, and making them thrive is our mission.
Wow, that's awesome to talk to the mammoth of the hospitality digitalization.
No, I think it's not mammoth. I think things take time, right? Most people that says, "Hey, look, how was that so easy?" I'm like, it's not easy. In my case, overnight success is 20 years in the work. So I would say we're not that successful. It just takes a long time to, step by step, helping restaurant convince them, and show value. And if you do the right thing, at the end of the day, I always believe it brings success.
Very exciting. And what do you think is something that makes Deliverect special? Why restaurants are using you, and what is the value that you guys are bringing?
I think it's multifaceted, right? I think the core of it is that we're really the specialist in the restaurant industry, right? I think we never took shortcuts. To give you an idea, when we started the company in 2018-19 was very much about, hey, how do we help these restaurants to work with these marketplace aggregators, right? And what do I mean with not taking shortcuts? Back then, there was no APIs even. Uber Eats doesn't have an API. Deliveroo didn't have an API. Glovo, DoorDash, all these guys were, still very, in the early innings. And so we co-created these APIs, set up these partnerships and the relationship. And why is that hard? Because it takes a lot more work to co-build and find a quick way of getting orders in, right? Second to that, similar to the other spectrum is, yes, one side we work with these marketplaces, but we seamlessly connect with the existing hardware, software of a restaurant. What do I mean is these point of sale systems. So today we almost have 1,500 integrations. So long spectrum of point of sale systems from Oracle to Micros to NCR to Toast to Lightspeed. So from new and old. And I think, doing the right thing, really helping them to make that change, result in a lot of success because the integration is more smooth and things work, right? Second, I think at the core of Deliverect in our DNA is we're a software company. So we are very much focused on innovation, bring a lot of new products. So if you think about from the early days from, where we had the crazy COVID boom to today, we've fully migrated from not just managing aggregator to today, a full suite of digital solutions, helping restaurants to sell on these marketplaces, but as well on their first party, even on social, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, up to in-store with kiosks. So helping them to be that omni-channel partner, the trusted advisor has paid off.
Sounds like a Swiss knife for the restaurants who wants to sell something online.
Yeah, it's more about, I think you need to provide the solution that is fitting, right? And why is that? A restaurant is not a cookie cutter. People talk about restaurant, but restaurant is very big in variance, right? You're talking about quick serve restaurants, burgers, to, local Chinese restaurants. Every restaurant has their own DNA. And also that means that the tech stack or the solution they need to be tailored. And so, from day one, we set out to, be API first, allowing them to use the solution they want, but also allow them to build on top of it. So we're very partner focused. And I think this is, where we come from. We understand that in the restaurant industry, it's not about one solution that you lock them in. You need to give them the flexibility so that if they grow or they change directions, it just works.
Very interesting. And you mentioned among the online tools, you mentioned also Deliverect. Can you share a bit more about that? Is it also like a point of sales that you guys provide in some hardware, or what is it?
We don't do point of sales, right? So I think in our spectrum, what we do is we help them restaurant to do all the order taking, right? So order taking one side online, in the online world, digitally, if you think about it, it's these marketplaces, social, website, and so on. But more and more today, order taking is done also digital in-store, right? Yes, if you have a sit-down restaurant, you have waiters and so on. But if you talk about these quick serve and fast casual, especially I think in today's trends where inflation is high, it's really hard to find labor. Automation and selling digital is also crucial in store. And so in Q4 last year, we acquired a kiosk company that we have integrated fully in our offering. Right. And why is that important? A restaurant says, hey, you're today already managing all locations, all our menus, all our promos, all our pricing. Why don't you make sure that it works across the board? Because when it's busy in store, it should affect something online, vice versa. So, adjusting all of it in one central place becomes super crucial. It's not because we don't have these solutions that we still don't work with partners. We still have a very open partner ecosystem, but we realize that certain restaurants want to have one vendor that can provide everything. So we have a fully tailored solution toward that. But like I said, we are not a point of sale company. I built point of sale before, and that's a promise I can make that we're not going to go into that direction, right? So we really are agnostic and helping the digital side of things.
You also mentioned that you help to sell the restaurants across all social media. And to me, social media is a big trend in food delivery, and not only food delivery. Everything is becoming social media, and social media is going everywhere. Could you please share how does it work and how do you guys enable the restaurants to sell online? For example, can I order a pasta now on Instagram right away, or see a video on TikTok and order a steak for myself?
Exactly that. I think one of the things we done is we saw the rise of social media, and especially I think where you have a lot of reels and stories, right? And especially influenced by that. Evenings at 11 p.m. I start scrolling, get hungry. But so what happens is that at that moment you actually have your customer's intent, and so we are, for example, a Meta partner, allowing us to have embedded link on the story so that when you click, you can stay in Instagram, but automatically you can order them from the restaurant, then connected with our dispatch network, we can even deliver to you. So it allows restaurant today to be, really omni-channel possible where the customer is, and allows them to also sell on these third parties. If you think about it, in retail, it's already happening. If you think about TikTok, it's a massive, massive boost, especially in Asia, where you see a lot of sales of retail going through these platforms. And we see the same will happen in restaurants. And we just want to give these restaurants the optionality to, sell anywhere and deliver with anyone. Right. Because at the end of the day, you just need to be where your customer is. And, as the generations that, are growing older, they are not per se in your standard platforms. They are very much on, the newer social media. To be fair, sometimes I need to ask my daughter, like, hey, show me how it works on TikTok in detail. But, what they do today and how they get influenced and how they order is astonishing.
Very interesting. You have seen the news. There are a couple of companies like Glovo, Rappi, Uber Eats, who already started integrating the videos and the social element into their platforms. What do you think about that? Do you think that it's like a new trend of talkification or video kind of embedding everywhere and the scrolling kind of mechanism that is with us already forever that is going to overtake the industry? And do you think it can in any way, I don't know, even impact the long-term view and the UX of the current food delivery apps?
I think so. I think it's really about what today the newer generation are, right? Even if you think about the recent move, I don't know if you heard of Wonder acquiring Tastemate. That's really a video production platform where one side is, hey, how do I get my customers on my platform or my app? And it's really the marketplace advertising they do. At the end of the day, these Uber Eats, DoorDash, Wonder. They're specialized in marketing, right? They're specialized in getting their customers on you and me on these apps. We get alerted to it. And so to entice us, it's part of, this experience, right? That's why you have, a lot of television studios just doing cooking shows. I think the combination of both would really work is you get inspired and, you're not just being sold, but you see how it's made. And then look, right there, you can have a small click on a button and you can get your food delivered. I think that total experience is going to be lifting off. And look, again, why? I would say it's just, the generation change, right? Younger kids, even us, where we are so used to scrolling hours and hours on these platforms. Well, why not on these other alternative platforms where you can also even have the actions to get the food delivered?
That's true. The times are changes and the generations are changing, and it feels like the way we consumed even 5 years ago is going to be completely different in 5 years. Who knows how is it? You definitely know a lot how it was, and seeing food delivery aggregators worldwide, and you have seen different waves of their development with crazy times during the COVID 20 to 2021, and then slowdown in 2022, and then stabilization on the road to profitability 23, 24. How do you see this journey and the change of the aggregators, the change of the merchants, the change of the consumers? And where do you see that moving forward, maybe?
No, I think it's as you mentioned, it was a big push, right? I think aggregators started, I think the first interaction I had was 2017 and 18, and that's why, we started Deliverect, because our customer was seeing, hey, 5 and 10% of their volume were going through these marketplaces. What happens if, it's more? Like Amazon took over the retail world, and so that's why we created Deliverect, to give them control. I think during the COVID year, you have aggressive expansion, and of course, when the world opened up in 2022, you had some pullback, right, where demand stabilized and profitability became a focus. I think since then, they have very much focused on operations, making sure that their revenue stream is also diversified, especially on the DSP side. They looked at taking higher rates, but I think that's not where the goal is. It's about how to make it better so that they can have a better bottom line. At the end of the day, I think if you look at all the reports, we're still looking at quite big growth, right? If you think about it, the foods industry is one of the biggest. Standard, it grows around 5%. But still, if you look at the delivery segments, all report, up to 2030, we're still looking at a compounded annual growth rate of 15% and above, right? So
Wow.
there's still a lot of growth ahead. Part because of restaurants still, adopting, but as well, I think they have diversified today more and more even into convenience retail, where, we work with larger retailers as One Stop, Tesco, and so on around the world. And you see that, these volumes of people buying milk, it's crazy, right? So that's where we do see there's a lot of growth still for the marketplaces. I think for the restaurant side, the merchant side, I think after the initial rush, because they didn't have a chance, they are realizing that they do need to run it operationally efficient. It's not today very much only about top line, it's very much on bottom line. Most restaurant chains I talk to, and that's also where we specialize, is, hey, yes, we can help you to increase more sales, but if that's is all go through promos and going to cost you a lot of money, it's not per se worth it, right? So they're very much focused now on bottom line. How do we optimize? How do we reduce error rate? How do we reduce refund rate? People don't have an idea, but previously, before we were in place, average restaurant had around 8% of orders refunded or had a flaw in it.
Wow.
So they lost a lot of money because they were only focused on top line. And so making sure that all these operation works improves their margin, right? And finally, I think you and me as consumer, we have also changed, right? During COVID, we had a lot of money and there was nothing to do. We were less price sensitive. We just said, hey, look, let's just use it. I think today, it's really about value. We're value driven. It's about loyalty. It's about, hey, how do I get the best experience? So overall, I think the market is just more mature, and that's a good thing. But I think we're just in the early start of this. When we started the company 2018, 19, I thought, hey, how would the world look like in 10 years? I would say, hey, I assume that you could order anything you want through any channel. Could be voice, could be Alexa, could be in your car, and somehow this thing is going to be delivered. I don't know how. Can be a rider, can be a robot, can be a drone. And even I thought, hey, one day it's just going to fill my fridge because if I'm running out of beer, why the hell would I need to go to the shop to do that, right? It should be automated. So, and I still believe in that vision. I think that's a matter of time before all this pans out. And if you think about that, then that the market is just very much in the first innings of this game-changing event.
This is so true. Like, really, it's the question of perspective, like how you look at it. Because from many perspectives, we can say that, yeah, market is already very consolidated. There are already established big players, and you can buy almost anything there. And further, it's going to be about probably adding more and more different verticals, right? Like pharmacies is already there, and groceries and beauty stuff and toys and you name it, right? But if you look from the perspective that you're mentioning, there is so much more to innovate in how it's going to be delivered, or how it's going to be ordered, or how it's going to be consumed, right? And that really does open new perspective on how you look at this industry, how do you look at these markets and the players, and where can it get us. But based on what I hear from you, the customer is going to get more and more spoiled, and in the end of the day, we're going to win from the convenience, right?
Yeah, I think so. Look, if you think about it, today you have self-driving cars, you have robots everywhere. AI is changing the world rapidly, right? So, it's a matter of time. I think on the short term, we always overestimate what, it can be, but on the long term, we underestimate. I really assume that, in this and a couple of years, we have smart fridges that already exist that just order. It will go through us because we're the pipeline, and then we'll place something, in the local Spar, Carrefour, or Tesco, and yeah, my fridge is going to be filled with beer that I want, with the food that I want. And when I get home, automatically, maybe I like Chinese food. I'm Asian, so why should that not be already there, right? All of this should be automated, right? Of course, you're going to still cook, but even there, look, if you think about all these, meal kits, why is that not automated? So I think, the future of how we going to survive and live is going to be very different, and it's going to be very much digital powered. And in the essence of it, and that's the thesis, if everything is becoming like that, who are the players that's going to help these merchants, these restaurants, these groceries, these convenience chains to handle all that complexity? How are they going to be able to, be so multi-channel? We're not talking about 3, 4 players. Maybe they have hundreds online digital channels to manage. How are they going to do that? How are they going to, handle one side their riders, but the other side the drones and the automated cars and I don't know what, right? So someone need to be helping them to keep control, and that's what we stand for.
Working for quite a while in hospitality, you have seen the digitalization steamrolling into the industry. The industry for the restaurants was not digitalized for a while, and from your journey, looks like you have always been on the edge of this innovation. How would you describe the current stage of the restaurants and hospitality innovation? And maybe you can share some challenges that restaurants are experiencing now.
No, 100%. I saw it all when I started, young. Actually, my father has a point of sale company, but even then, that was in the 90s. Convincing someone to use digital, not pen and paper, was quite hard. And today, you would say this is complete bollocks. What? They were using pen and paper and they don't want to use a computer. But in the 90s, it was impossible. So when I started the first iPad point of sale, iPad 1, when I pitched, to people that, actually restaurant want to adopt it, but then even investor, they're like, Zhong, you're crazy. Not one restaurant is ever going to use a tablet. Why the hell would anyone use a tablet to run their business? Well, it happens, right? So, and in all, I think restaurants side, the technology is really behind, but due to the COVID, due to the acceleration of, hey, we need to go digital, you see that the focus is there, right? I think there's a lot to do, but the change has been, tremendous, where people do understand that they need to be digital, that they need to be online, have online ordering tools, that they need to be on marketplaces. But I think it's very much the start of it, because there's so much to do. One side on the ordering side, but as well on automation of supply chain, right? Waste prevention, demand forecasting. These are the things that is still very much, still happening, and it's not being implemented everywhere. Further down the line, I think, if we look at it, obviously, AI is an important one, but it's also actually driven by the market, right? Why it's going to be automation and AI, things like kiosk and voice ordering and so on, so important is due to the current world we live in is really, really hard to find people to work in restaurant. Right. I live in the US, but then if you think about it, with the crackdown, there's a lot of immigrants not being able to work there. Right. People don't realize that, there's a majority of the people that work in the restaurant industry, a couple millions are immigrants, and most of them don't have papers.
Yeah.
So how do you find these people? Second is, with the rising costs and inflation, well, your end consumers is going to have a tough time to buy your stuff. So there will be pricing pressure. So if you don't find the people, or the people cost a lot, and, the food supply is becoming more expensive, the only way to endure that is, automation, right? And it's not taking away jobs. It's just because it's very hard to find people to do jobs. Similar has happened not only in the US, but in the UK, where, with the crackdown, it's really hard to find immigrants, right? And so, automation, AI that can drive operational efficiency and, accelerate the profit above the top line is going to be more crucial than ever.
True. So no longer the automation is a threat. It's a necessity that the industry will not just survive without, right? And without this optimization and without all these new tricks, how you reinvent the processes and how you reinvent your operations, is going to survive, not just to grow.
Yeah, 100%. I think at the end of the day, look, restaurant is still about passion. It's about, different cuisines. It's about authenticity. So, there's also a lot of talk about, let's put robots everywhere to cook everything. I think that's to be seen. I think people still want to, eat food from a real chef that makes some mistakes. Maybe it's a bit salty, but, it has character, whatever. I think, at the end of the day, technology whatever we provide is servicing to these people, right? To these restaurants. And we just want to make sure they can survive because, look, if you think about it, restaurants are the glue of a society. If you're a student, you're an immigrant, whatever, your first job is working in a restaurant. Surviving is being, able to go to these places. And so we need to make sure that they can equip themselves with the tools they have so that they can, keep on doing what they love, and that's cook with a passion.
So true. You guys are aggregating a lot of data about the restaurants and consumers. And you obviously see it like a completely different side of the operations. Which data points do you think are the most important for the merchants that restaurants should be tracking? And which do they usually miss the most?
I think there's a lot, right? I think one of the things is still efficiency. I think restaurants look too much on the top line. They really measure on the top line because normal restaurateurs and even the larger chains, they're very like, hey, top line driven, that's my revenue. And why is this complex? Is these days, if you work on these multi-channels, on these marketplaces, there's commission that you need to pay, that you need to take into account. And these commission are even not standard. It varies depending on your metrics. So for example, if your delivery time is way higher, these marketplaces will penalize you, right? So, I need to make sure my delivery metrics is there. If I have a lot of refunds because the quality is not good, I get penalized. Or even when they think about top line, they push too much on promos and ads where they pay. It looks amazing on top line, but then they only get the money afterward. They don't line up because there's so much cost going on to these advertising. So making sure that per channel you really measure your profitability is crucial, right? But then as well, all the other metrics that helps your overall business. As well in store, right? Sometimes in store, it sounds amazing, but then they do too many promos and so on. So making sure that everywhere, depending on how busy it is and how strenuous it is for your business, to increase or decrease pricing is key, right? Sometimes you just also need to just close a day, right? Maybe that's it's a day where you pay over hours, and why do you still do that? So. Metrics, and I think that's something that restaurant didn't care about before, but today they do.
So basically, changing the mindset that you actually need to track things. It's not even some special secret stuff, right? Like everything is there on the surface, but you actually need to start working with this data. And I assume that chains like Burger King, McDonald's, they do understand how to leverage that more, while the smaller shops, smaller restaurant chains, or just one family restaurant, they just don't even think about it because there are just so many things on their plate and so many things to cover that this is not even kind of a natural part of that, not the first thing that you consider when running this type of business, right?
No, especially look, if you think about these smaller restaurants, but even the mid-sized chains, they're cash driven, right? So they look at, hey, how much money do I have? Can I pay the bills? But then, if you're doing a lot more digital, sometimes it's delayed payments. It's not the next day, right? So you need to have better planning. And, they don't then understand do I get penalized that moment because it's something that happened before. So you need to be almost, very much proactive, right? Even if you're on the digital channels, it's easy if you have a real store, your door is open, then customers coming in. If you're on the digital side, you don't even know if you're opening all these places. Because it could be that you were open on Uber Eats, DoorDash, Instagram, and so on. But then maybe there was a small internet issue, right? And then now you're closed everywhere. But then you never reopen. And only after a day or two, you realize, hey, I have not gotten any revenue. Right. But the problem with restaurants is revenue that is past, they never come back. Right. And so even there, that's why we have solutions that we launched Post Sentinel to help restaurants to have that full overview of what's happening. Right. So technology is here to help restaurants, but because so complex, these multi-channel environments, you really need to have the tools to help you to run it smoothly and do not lose volume and revenue.
What about the work in different continents, in different parts of the world? Like cultures are different, people are different, the cuisines are different. And I assume that your operations and the nature of the operations of the merchants in LATAM versus the operations in Europe, Africa, Asia, there must be different. Maybe core stays the same, but there are definitely some differences between them. Maybe you can point out some, I don't know, who is more hardworking, who processes more orders, or who is more creative, or I don't know, maybe there is again a new perspective on this question.
No, I think every region is very diverse. Similar to restaurants, it's very fragmented, right? I think that's why we have so many offices. We work with local markets from Sydney and EMZ to Mexico City to New York and so on, right? Um, if we look at the marketplace landscape, I think it's very different where you have similarity between LATAM, BITMENA, and APAC. I think because there is more price sensitive customer base, right? Maybe different than MENA because they have very rich people that order, but then they have the supply of the riders are maybe cheaper labor, and so they can do
Right.
it. But overall, I think in Latin Asia, it's price-sensitive consumers where it's also very much focused on cash. So it's very different where than online ordering, and they use a lot more mobile, right? And I think that's where also you see the local players dominating, right? If you think about Asia, it's Meituan in China that has moved to Hong Kong with Kita and now in Saudi. But then in Latam, you definitely see local players again dominating. That's like Rappi and iFood, right? And what they also do is it goes beyond, I would say, just food. There are often super apps that even integrate financial services to get you coupons and so on. So it's one-stop shop. Where I think if you look at Europe or North America, as it's a more mature market and heavily regulated, you see indeed, the standard apps there, where it's more a focus on, that food side, the premium experience, and getting that delivery locked up. I think as we go, you will see more and more of that super app ecosystem, right? And that's why I do believe the number of digital channels will be increasing, right? If you think about if you go to China, I have not been for a long time, but last year I went for 2 weeks. Every restaurant you go in, you can order on your phone the same way. And the reason why they can do that is because it's ruled by two super apps. It's ruled by WeChat and Alipay. So the experience across a nation is exactly the same. And so you're going to see that, I think, popping up where, that's maybe what Elon Musk is doing with X, where he's creating one super app to have that experience, right? So it's quite interesting where we're going to be headed, the super app route or, the fragmented, focus route of each app does something really, really good. So let's see how that evolves. But more channels, the more the better for us, anyways.
By the way, how do you see the trend going forward more? Like, is it the super app or the single standalone app? Because we have also seen these in last year in India, Swiggy just creating several new apps for itself for different occasions, right? While again, in the Middle East, there is a more of a direction towards the super app model. How do you see the merchant or the customer benefiting from that? Because you guys are basically a super app for B2B, if I can call you this way.
Well, we power any super apps with these B2B, right? I think there's a different angle and it will live beside each other, right?
Hmm.
For example, I think in the US, you have a Wonder that also acquired Grubhub. Wonder has a more focused, they have an app, but it's more focused on the local side. It's more about, hey, it's about the no local neighborhood and those are the local restaurants. But they still use, I would say, Grubhub's restaurant in Wonder because they now know what the local are. And instead of surfacing, hundreds of thousand restaurants, they say, hey, that's the neighborhood restaurant, right? And in the meantime, they still keep their Grubhub brand to cover the broader spectrum. I think it's more the marketing side. What are your ideal customer base? What are your ICP? And then you can customize marketing toward it, right? Similar, I think today you see a lot of groceries one side happening through standard solution as Instacart and so on, but more and more you see as well these offering in your apps that you have, right? So, I think it will be a duo, depending how they can market. I do see, if you look at the larger countries like China and so on, eventually the super app ecosystem does win because it makes life easier. That being said, look, it's very different in Asia or in China where it's very central led everything vs the rest of the Western world where you have competition and
Yeah.
change. So let's see how that evolved, but I think both will exist beside each other.
Interesting. Yeah, we just need to take a look and see. If you were to look at the industry now and you were to wish for some changes or some new trend or some new push to the whole digital ordering industry of food and grocery delivery, what do you think could be the trend or what do you think could be the push that could help the industry reach new milestone, like a new height of adoption, then new height of ordering numbers or efficiency?
Oh wow, I think the industry is moving very, very rapidly. So maybe not changing something, it's also good. I think where the industry will benefit is more data sharing, right? I think it's still very closed the world. We try to do our bit because we see one side from the marketplace, from the restaurant, the point of sale. But then I think the data sharing side would be good for everyone. To give you an idea, I mean, somewhere it's normal, but other side, a Uber, for example, or a DoorDash or Deliveroo would not know how busy it really is in the restaurant, right?
Mm,
Because they don't have a 360 overview. They have an overview about their platform and they know historically, how much they do. But how do they know if it's really good weather and the restaurant is fully busy because everyone is, sitting outside drinking, or, it's really miserable and there's no one inside, right? Because, if you have that data, it's gonna help these businesses to drive higher volume, right?
mm,
Because then it allows you to say, hey, look, actually it's really bad and there's no one in the restaurant. Push more volume to these restaurants and not to others, right? Because today that is disjointed a bit, right? Because every marketplace will push for their orders, but it will maybe cause a deterioration of quality because they are too busy in that kitchen, right? So having that connectivity of data and sharing would be really amazing. I think second is, look, everyone wants customer data, right? If you're a marketplace, they are not sharing that with a restaurant. It's valid for their own reasons, but I do think restaurant owners really want that, and I think the time has passed where you know, they should be worried that a restaurateur is going to take these customers and upsell directly. You and me, we're hooked on these delivery apps. We're hooked on the promotions. We're hooked on the notifications. It's not because a restaurant reached out to me directly. I'm going to still scroll and doom scroll through the app to see what I want at that time, right? So sharing data, I think it would be amazing. And the rest, I think, where we are headed towards is, of course, the age of AI, where you see
mm.
a lot of benefits, where you see, things happening on one side, ordering stuff. Think about voice to in-store, even where you have vision AI, where we even have product to help you to look at what's happening in store, what your packaging, your quality, up to AI to help you to regulate demand, pricing, proactively setting up different menus, promos, and so on. So that's definitely going to change. Everything where you before need really a lot of marketeers. It's going to be agent that's going to help you and run it, right? And that's benefits everyone, the customers because they're going to get a better pricing, and the restaurant because they're going to be able to prevent the loss of their bottom line.
Sounds like a lot of fun for the future, but definitely we need to have some changes in the democratizing of the data and sharing it more, making more open source solutions and encouraging people to share and work with this data. Definitely
I'm a
everybody will
big fan.
benefit from that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of open system. Look, I've been doing restaurant tech for a long time. I get it, everyone's very close, but at the end of the day, we need to benefit the restaurants, right? If they are successful, they know what's going on, everyone will win. And sometimes you need to be brave enough to cannibalize your own business and build something bigger.
Cannot agree more. John, thank you so much. It's been great pleasure. Thank you very much for coming. I've had a lot of fun with this conversation. If you would like to share something else, something more with the listeners, please, the stage is yours.
Look, I think one of the things we're really excited about, that's why we have this podcast, is we are releasing a lot of new product. One side, I think AI is crucial for us. To give you an example, we even have agents already running that help restaurants to manage their menus, and we have seen that we can increase their AOV by almost 4 or 5%,
Oh,
as well
wow.
their revenue we can increase by 11%, and this without even changing prices and run ads. Just dynamically positioning your menus on the right way already has such an impact. So I think that's really exciting part that we see as a future. And for Direct, I think at the end of the day, we are here to service a restaurant. Our mission is to make sure they are successful. That's all what we want to do, because if they see value, then we have a right to exist. So for the rest, really thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm a big fan, and keep up the good work, Stefan.
Thank you very much, John, for coming. Thank you for a great conversation again. And guys, thank you very much for listening. Go to the links in description. Check out John, check out Deliverect. Guys are doing a lot of innovation for the industry and on their website too. So check it out. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Thank you, John, for coming.
Thank you.